All right, it's good to see this small crowd out. All right, so we are picking up with lesson 3. So we discussed question 1 last week as far as the roles of the man in the family. So, Lord willing, we will get to the women because Jesse didn't say it all in his sermon. All right, we do have some things that we have to discuss. We went through the 10 commandments of the husband. So question number 2. So I think that one of the things, one of the benefits that we have within scriptures is we are just loaded with good examples and bad examples that we can read of that help us just in general live our Christian lives. And there's no exception with both being a man, being a husband, being a father, and also being a mother and a wife. So what are some good and bad examples of husbands and fathers that can kind of help us steer us in the right direction or the wrong direction? Lena, you got somebody?
No.
Okay. Andy?
How about Manasseh for bad?
All right.
Manasseh.
Oh, Manasseh?
He was bad. He didn't instruct his sons.
Okay, so Miss Shirley said Eli, and I know in 1 Samuel 2 and verse 12 it says, "Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord." And just reading that, you might think, okay, well, can Eli really be blamed for that? Maybe they had some bad influences later on. But then in 1 Samuel 3 and verse 13, it says, "For I have told him that I am about to judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knew, because his sons brought a curse on themselves, and he did not rebuke them." So, yeah, it's pretty plain that Eli was not the father that he should have been, and looks like there's a serious lack of discipline that's going on with Eli's house. So, yeah, that's definitely a good example of a bad example. Normay?
I had a terrible time finding good examples. I only found, other than God, who was the only good example that was consistent. I found Noah in Genesis 7 was the only other good example that I could find, and then he turned into a bad example by Genesis chapter 9. So everybody else, the list is long and illustrious of the bad examples. So.
Yeah, Noah is one that I had down, and I think that hopefully one of the things that we can see from all of these examples is even those when we have good things we can mention, they're not perfect. All right, we can talk about David, and we can talk about Noah, and we can talk about Abraham, we can talk about all these people that we got some good examples that we can look at, and they've got bad things that they did. All right, which should make us realize that they're just like us. All right, we should be striving to follow them and follow their good examples and not follow their bad examples. But one of the things that was mentioned about Noah in chapter 6 was that he was a righteous man, blameless in his time, and that he walked with God. I think that's a pretty good role model for a father and for a husband. If somebody could come and say, well, Jason was a righteous man, blameless in his time, and he walked with God, I'd feel pretty good. It's a pretty good characteristic list that I would like to have as a husband and as a father. So, yeah, he did some stupid stuff, but
It's a good example
okay.
because he did sacrifices for his children, even when his wife was kind of saying bad stuff. He still didn't set her aside. And then Joseph, the father of Jesus. Because he listened to God and he did not, again, betray her and give her away, and obviously he took care of the family.
Yeah, definitely. Let me get Andy again, and then I'll get Mark.
Jonadab, same kind of thing like David. So you can see that he trained his sons, who the Bible tells us that it passed down from generation to generation that they done good.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are Lots of bad ones and a few good ones mentioned specifically.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Kings. There's a whole lot of bad ones and not so many good ones. Go ahead, Norm.
A good point that you make also about the work of a father has to be looked at over the entire life of that person, because one of the great blessings that we have is the idea of being able to repent. That shows a lot of character for somebody to humble themselves before God after making what could be a huge mistake, and then turning that life around and trying. Now, it doesn't undo the consequences. So for grading, if the point scale is about what happened in the way of consequences, then we're all going to lose. But the person, the father that is that great example of, despite making the bad mistakes, turns their life around, and God at the end gives them you did good. You were my friend. You were, walked after me, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, I was going to mention Abraham. I think he's an outstanding example of a good father. Even though he did make some mistakes, he, of course, lied about Sarah being his sister at one point. But I think he set a pretty good example for Isaac, it seems. He showed a lot of faith in God when he took Isaac to sacrifice him, and then, of course, didn't have to. I think Isaac could see a lot of faith in his father at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something that Isaac would remember. My dad was fixing to kill me, but he did it because of the faith and the trust that he had in the Lord. So that was pretty strong. Andy?
Your question said husbands and fathers, and so I was thinking about Boaz as the husband part of that.
Yeah, no, that's one that I had down. Obviously, he was very honorable. He was a noble man, so I think that's a pretty good example. Jesse? Joseph, as a good or a bad example?
Good.
Yeah, he is definitely a strong one too. Jacob. I was thinking Joseph, but Jesse. Too many J's.
Well, I'll give you a J. You'd be hard pressed to find something negative said about Joshua.
Yeah, he's definitely the one that I highlighted just because from a very early age, I don't know why, but he was someone that I always looked up to. And when you have someone that there's so much going on around him, and he's basically telling the whole people, you choose who you want to, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And that's a pretty big thing. So yeah, Joshua was definitely one that I would have on my list as a good example. A couple other bad ones I had, Nabal, and there's a lot of them in the Old Testament that you could look at. But in 1 Samuel 25, verse 17, it says, Now therefore, know and consider what you should do, for evil is plotted against our master and against all his household, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. And what was horrible was he actually had a pretty good wife. So it tells you just because you've got a good wife, I mean, you're going to be a good husband. An example to me of a bad husband is Ahasuerus, that's going to allow his wife to come and dance in front of a bunch of other men. I got some problems with that one. Ahab, whew, I mean, he may be top of the list for evil and for husbands. The people of Malachi that we actually studied in one of Jesse's sermons. Lot was a horrible leader of his family and caused great harm for his family. So I think he's one. I think that when you talk about good and bad, I think Jacob is another one of those that probably has some bad characteristics. But if you want to talk about a sincere love for his wife, Jacob had that for Rachel. And in Genesis 29:18 through 20, it says, Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days. because of his love for her. That's some pretty serious love, because that's a whole lot of work for all those years. And then another good one that I had was Zacharias, which kind of goes along with what Lena was saying with Joseph, because Zacharias, the father of John, in Luke 1 verse 6, it says they were both righteous, and this is Zacharias and Elizabeth. They were both righteous in the sight of God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and requirements of the Lord. So I think that's a pretty good example. So obviously we got a lot of people that we can look to as people that we should follow in their footsteps, and some that we most definitely should not. Anybody else you got for number 2? Bonnie?
And Sapphira.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't know, she wasn't there when he lied, but they asked her, you know, did you sell it for such and such price? And she said yes. So he's obviously setting a bad example of leading his wife.
Yeah. She was submissive, but she shouldn't have been submissive in that situation. Any other for question 2?
See,
Yeah, that was one of the big things that we talked about. I don't remember if that was lesson 1 maybe, about all the issues with the favoritism. All right, question number 3. According to Genesis 2 verse 18, what purpose for man was woman created? All right, so what does that term mean?
Just what it says.
Suitable helper.
In case you didn't hear what Shirley said, exactly what it says. All right, let's not make this difficult, okay?
That means what it said.
Yeah, that's what's it's kind of aggravating with a lot of scriptures. People just want to make it difficult. And like, just what does it say? Go ahead, Norm.
Help meet, and the word meet means suitable, and so it's somebody that is a perfect match for another individual in this particular case. So the man has certain areas that just do not, he's lacking in certain areas, and so he needs a helper to be able to fill in those gaps and be able to be somebody that he can, there's three cords together, you know, to make the strong rope.
Yeah.
So the phrase, so the New American Standard says, I will make him a helper suitable for him. And the phrase can also be translated a helper corresponding to him or sustainer beside him. And one of the points that I want to make, and this is one that we'll make again here in just a second, but the word helper is not a demeaning term. All right, there's so many negative connotations that are kind of attributed to what a woman is supposed to be and what a wife is supposed to be, and I think sometimes we feel like, well, they're just the helper, and it's like we're trying to put them down or something. All right, there's nothing demeaning about it at all. And one of the interesting things is the same Hebrew word that is often used of God in the Old Testament is where he's described as our help. Okay, that's pretty good. And so we don't need to get so caught up in what society wants to have us understand as far as a helper or a helpmeet. Go ahead, Andy.
My Bible dictionary that I used, it said, which is for King James Version, and so it was focusing on the meat part, and so it said that it was opposite or a counterpart. And so if you think about it, just like a counterpart, so what is something that is similar but the same at the same time? But if we look at it in context for what was going on there, God had just passed all the animals by Adam to see what he would call them, to see so that he could see all of them, and there was nobody there for Adam. And so his counterpart needed to be someone that could socialize with him, could talk to him, because the animals, well, I'm not going to say they don't talk because the snake talk, but normally animals don't talk to you. and then for reproductive purposes. So, different than animals, but given the text, the same process that's there. Adam needed someone that was just like all the other animals that had come by him, needed a mate.
Yeah.
So I was going to read, this is from Harkrider's book, Building Strong Homes, in regards to the helpmeet. He says the word help means to aid or assist. This denotes God's design for the woman to support the man. Whatever the husband's role is and whatever the family goals are, the woman is to help bring those to fulfillment. That man needs help testifies to his insufficiency without woman. He has responsibilities that he alone cannot perform. In this respect, a wife must see herself in some role as superior to her husband, created special to the function in ways he cannot. A godly woman views these roles as monuments to her unique qualities. The word meet means to be suitable for. The definition of the word is literally over against and means to answer to correspond to, or to be suitable for. The thought is that woman was produced from the same kind of mold as man, but was made opposite to him to fit together with his being, much like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. She was bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. She was made from the man for the man. What the animal kingdom was unable to do for man, God designed woman to accomplish. The two were to become one. Had God made another man, he would have approved of homosexuality, but he didn't. Had God made several women, he would have approved of polygamy, but he didn't. So, any other comments on number 3? All right. Now to the one we all been waiting for, and Clarissa must be getting ready because she was like, she knows what's coming. Question number 4. Ken's already laughing. All right. Read the following passages and list and explain the roles of the woman in the family. Again, this is going to be both of a wife and also as a mother. So, what's one of the roles of a wife? Marissa?
Their husband.
Love their husbands. All right?
What's that mean?
What it said.
Y'all really trying to get through this lesson.
Norm?
I included love the husband and children in that, because the wife has a unique, can do some things, let's say, that the husband cannot do, that the father cannot do in dealing with the children, but it's doing what is best to have a strong relationship with both the husband and the children, and being that, again, filling those gaps. I love the way you said there's just certain things that the wife does better than the husband. And if that wasn't so, like you said, there'd be two husbands, you know. It just and so it's a complementing thing that brings it and makes it so that the two are stronger than each individual.
Yeah. The Greek word that is used here for love their husband and love their children, it has its basis in phileo type love, but the one for the husband actually means to be fond of the man and affectionate as a wife. And then the love their children is to be fond of one's children, and this is a maternal type love. This is a natural thing, obviously, as a mother, that you should have this bond and this connection to your children. But yeah, that's obviously a big one. We hit that one first, since with the men we decided to wait to the very end to hit that one. So, all right, so you got to love your husband, you got to love your children. Is that a conditional love?
No. All right. Just like with
the men, it doesn't say love your husband as long as he continues to look good, or love your husband as long as he continues to lead you in the way that he should, or love your husband as long as he does the dishes. Like, this isn't a conditional type love. This is a commandment from the Lord. All right, what else? What are some other things, roles of women? To be discreet, okay?
chaste, okay? Discreet, I think chaste.
Another word is pure. So that's modest, clean. What did you say, Ken?
Childbearing.
Okay. No. It's definitely something just for the women. What else?
Okay. Workers at home.
So we'll talk about that in more detail when we get to question 5, so I'm going to hold off on that one. Bonnie?
Submit to the authority that submit to the authoritative role structure that God has set up. So in this case, respect the husband, respect his role that he has. That's unique to the wife. It's not something that is cross family, friends of yours. That is unique within the family.
Now, Norman, that just sounds derogatory.
What's that?
Are you sure that's what a wife's role is? You taking that straight from Scripture? I'm messing with you, Norm. Bonnie, were you going to say the same thing? You got something different?
Okay, so we'll get to yours in just a
Okay.
second.
Then let's go ahead and let's stay on this one from Norm. All right. Yeah, Norm, I was just joking with you, man, because submission has become such an ugly word in our society that it's kind of like with the leadership on the men's side. The fact that women are called to submit to their husbands is something that does not go over well at all in our society. And I think that so much of it is because, again, like with the men, there's a total misunderstanding of what that actually means. And people want to kind of press this idea of oppression and domination, which that's not part of the word. That's not part of it at all. And I don't even think it's necessarily just, women's rights or women's. I just think that it's an overwhelming theme that has been pushed on us, that being submissive to a man, especially for a woman to be submissive to a man, is just not something that our society wants to talk about. So one of the things that I think is good for us to think about whenever we're trying to think about what it actually means to be submissive, and I guess before I say this, so what does it mean? And you can't just pull up on your phone Jesse's slides from Sunday. What does that look like for a wife to be submissive? I'm going to get Norm, but I need some women to answer too. Go ahead, Norm.
Well, it starts with humility, and that's why all of us have the God-given responsibility to submit to each other, because we're all supposed to start with humility of spirit, and then that then sets the right tone and place for the relationship that you are initiating. Again, with each other, each one of us, man to man, man to woman, woman to man, we're each to be submissive, and it starts with that. But if the wife takes on the proper humility, then it will allow her then to look at the God-given responsibility as a privilege and honor of being able to serve in that role that she has been given, and we'll take it beyond that.
Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with creation too. It starts there. Woman wasn't created first, man was. And woman was created then to be his helper. So that is our role. We are, in a sense, beneath man. Yes, we're equal in terms of salvation, but he is our head. Our husband is our head. And so, practically speaking, I think a lot of times that means we have to bite our tongues. If you're wanting like a practical answer.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean,
that's what we're trying to
he's going
discuss.
to make decisions, and sometimes we'll be a part of that decision, sometimes we won't be. And of course, as long as it's falling within God's word and what he has commanded, he's not going against that, then sometimes we have to take a back seat to whatever decision he is making. And that's just kind of part of it.
So what Bonnie is saying is
When
when
he's making stupid decisions, you got to bite your tongue. And what Bonnie was talking about there as far as creation, Paul deals with that pretty clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. As far as this is the order of things, the way that God has created things, and we have to be okay with that. We have to be able to live within those bounds of which God has created. Other comments? Ms. Shirley?
If the man does his role as he should, it's not as hard for a woman to do her.
yeah,
She said she says it's always the man's fault. That's what she said. That's what she said the second time. What she said in the beginning was if the man does his part the way that he's supposed to, that it's pretty easy for a woman to do her part. And while that is 100% true, and the reverse of that is also true, when the woman is doing her part, it makes it a lot easier for the man to do his part. All right, so what are we saying? Well, if the man just does his part and the woman does her part, everything's going to be great. But what happens is the man don't do his part and the woman don't do her part. And also what happens is everybody thinks that their responsibility is conditional. All right? And I'm not talking about just within society. I'm talking about within the church. We got husbands that aren't leading the way that they should, and their excuse is, well, my wife is not submitting the way that she should. And we got wives that aren't submitting the way that they should, and their excuse is, well, my husband is not leading the way that he should. God didn't place a condition on those. There's no condition that says if your husband doesn't live up to his expectations, then you don't have to either. And God doesn't say, if the wife doesn't live up to her expectations, husband, you don't have to live up to your expectations either. All right, we got to get that out of our head. So one of the things that really gets me is, I mentioned this with the men and their responsibility, and how that I'm afraid that we have a total misunderstanding of the relationship between Christ and the church, and I think that we have a total misunderstanding of what it means to submit. Because submission is to me, a term that I would use is yielding. And you know who the best example of that is? Jesus Christ. Turn over to Philippians. All right, it blows my mind that we are so bold in speaking out against this, and even on social media, there are Christians that will speak out against this, and it really bothers me that we don't recognize and understand that Christ was the ultimate yielder. So in Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 5, it says, "Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped or a thing to be asserted." Verse 7, "But emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross." Jesus is not asking you to do anything that he didn't do himself. Jesus submitted his will to the Father, and he yielded to the interests of the Father. And I think that when we're trying to find what does it mean and how do we do this, I think that he is, obviously he is a great example of that. Go ahead, Norm P.
Sadly, we try to disconnect or dissociate submission with the husband and wife relationship because it's a spiritual thing, a church thing, a Christian thing, from everything else, every other part of life. It's like there's rules for us for when we're looking at the Bible, and there's rules for us when we're not looking at the Bible. And in truth, we submit willingly, like God asks, every day, all the time, to multiple people that are not a part of our family. We voluntarily submit to the laws that in Putnam County. If a sheriff pulled us over, we would pull over to the side. We would pull out all the things we know he's going to ask for. When he knocks on the window and he tells us to roll it down, we're going to roll it down. We're not doing this resisting. We're willingly going to do that. If they want us to get a permit to carry a gun, we're going to go, we're going to find out the rules, find out the laws, go to whatever school. We're submitting every day to somebody, something, willingly in the world. But we refuse to take that same application and apply it to a man and wife. And we do this so often, it's scary almost. With so many aspects of our life as a Christian, it's normal, actually. We do this all the time. We just refuse to admit that it's something we actually need to do within the church and within our own families.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that one of the things that kind of gets me too is we want to explain it away by saying, well, we're supposed to submit to each other. Yeah, we are. But we use that as a means of, well, we're supposed to submit to each other. So, what's the difference with, the wives then submitting to their husbands? Well, there is a difference. There's an obvious difference because in Ephesians chapter 5, literally the verses are back to back. All right, so yes, we should have a humble servant's heart that we're willing to serve everybody as Christians. That's the attitude that we should have. And that is most definitely the attitude that we should have when we go into a marriage relationship. That we're here to serve one another and that your interests are going to be more important than mine. But then it is specifically given to the wives, be subject to your own husbands. And so we can't explain it away as, well, you're supposed to be subject to me, you're supposed to be submissive to me, because within the family dynamic, it's the role of the wife to then submit or yield to the husband. And so, ladies, it should be your desire to do that. And if you're not married, and it's not your desire, you don't have the desire to submit to this man, then you better not get married. Andy?
One of the, we might get to, I don't know if I don't think I've seen it on here.
You go ahead.
In First Peter 3 and verses 1 and 2 is one of my favorite passages. Not necessarily for this particular reason.
Okay, let's make that clarification.
Yeah, but because of the implication of that submission role, of how powerful that it is. Because when the New King James, it says, wives likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear or respect. And so it's that role that they've been given is a very powerful role. So powerful that if your husband is not a Christian, just because of the way that you behave yourself, without a word, just by your example, you could teach them that, hey, what I am, you could be, and they would want to be that way.
Definitely. One of the motivations that I would hope, that a woman would have in Ephesians 5 and verse 22, when it says be subject to your own husbands, it doesn't stop there. It says as to the Lord. And we obviously, as Christians, we have no issues with yielding to the Lord and His wishes. And so we should carry that over. And then again in verse 24, it says, but as the church is subject to Christ, so also wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. And so wives have to submit to their husbands in everything. There's not an exception rule. There's not an exception clause that we can read there, unless this or unless that. Well, he doesn't love me right. So, I'm not going to submit to, he doesn't do this or he doesn't do that. Again, there's no exception clause to that. I saw another hand. Hang on, Norm, let me get Bonnie first.
Go along with that, the passage in Titus that we were talking about earlier, at the end of verse 5, it says, after it lists all the things that the women are supposed to do, it says, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. And that's a pretty big deal. Because you think about how you can set such a good example out in the world, being a good wife, being a good family unit, and the praise that you could bring upon the church, and the opposite of that, of course, like it's saying here. I mean, this is it's a pretty big deal, because it all everything in society, like we've already discussed, comes back to that first institution, the family. And when we're not doing that correctly, we're going to dishonor the Word of God.
Yeah, and I'm afraid that that's happening just because of the way people
kind of talk poorly about this, even on social media. I think that they're dishonoring God, because this is God's design, and trying to explain it away.
They want to put a master-slave implication on it, and that is not it at all.
No.
So let me ask this question. And this is to the husbands. This is to the man. So God tells the wife that she is to submit. So husbands, what if she don't?
Yeah, you just love her more.
So I think that
And maybe not as much now as maybe is in some future generations, but I think that it is still out there. I think too often the husband thinks that his role as the head is, I'm going to make you. I'm going to make you do what you're told to do. We're not told to do that as husbands. All right? There's no, okay, if you don't submit to me, I'm going to punish you in some way. That's not the responsibility or a role that has been given to husbands. And so we need to make sure that we don't become overbearing, which I think some of that has happened and probably caused some of the issues that we're even talking about now. But I hope that as parents too, this is a huge one. All right, all of you that have been married for any period of time knows that you're going to run into difficult situations, and the spouse that you choose can either make things very easy or they can make things very, very hard. And this is why the decision of who you are going to marry is so important. And we'll touch on that some more as we get toward the end of the class too. Anything else just on the submission, Norm?
Phyllis used to say that this was one of the women's superpowers. I mean, these roles that God set out for the woman, when used by the woman properly, have a huge impact on the man. And it's what disarms, it's what turns the barbarian into the civilized person. It's what conquered the West. It's what, I mean, when you had wives who were performing the proper role within the family, those families, those men in that family, which represented society, and then the impact of those on the godless society outside of it, these are superpowers. And Joe used to laugh about how women during the 70s and 80s just willingly just gave up their superpowers and made a bad trade for being a man.
yeah.
All right, are there any other things in the list of being a woman? So we've talked about love, being submissive, being pure, being workers at home.
Nope.
So mentioned there her role in helping instruct and teach the children in the home.
Yeah, that's a huge role for
A mom.
Indicates that a good wife and a good mother is just as important a provider as a husband. and that she's got an equal share in how the family as a whole is provided for.
Partnership,
Yeah.
Another word that was used was kind, speaking of wives, and the definition of that is of good constitution or nature, useful, good, pleasant, agreeable, joyful, happy, excellent, distinguished. That can be, sometimes it can be tough, especially if you've got a husband that ain't acting right. Upright, honorable, so that covers a whole lot of things right there. All right, so we hit on this with the husband. So these are the 10 commandments of wives. Again, this is from Brother Mark Copeland from down in Florida. So number 1, expect not your husband to give you as many luxuries as your father has given you after many years of hard labor. And I guess if you've got a father that, he's worked a whole lot of years to be able to provide for you, and you marrying a husband that doesn't have that many years of work, so don't expect so much. Number 2, you shall work hard to build your house with the husband that you have, not fantasizing about the one that could have been. Number 3, you shall not nag. Hit him with your frying pan. It's kindlier. I think that one may be a little bit tongue in cheek, but obviously the nagging is talked about there in Proverbs, and that can really, really wear a man out. Number 4, you shall coddle your husband and be a warm wife. And we've talked about that quite a bit with 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Remember that the frank approval of your husband is more to you than the side glances of many, and I think that's supposed to be many of your neighbors. All right. So remember that the frank approval of your husband is more to you than the side glances of many strangers. 2 Peter 2 and verse 14. Number 6, you shall not yell at your husband, but will be a gentle and quiet spirit. Number 7, permit no one to assure you that you are having a hard time of it. Number 8, you shall not fail to dress up for your husband with an eye to please him as you did before marriage. We read that from Song of Solomon, how really we should strive to have the same affection, the same love that we have toward our spouse as we did before we got married. Number 9, you shall submit to your husband from your heart and allow him to be head of the household. And then number 10, you shall assure your husband and others that he is the greatest man alive. Okay, I don't think people agree with that last one, but actually that's the one I wanted to hit on.
Wording, I don't know, it's throwing me off, some of them, how they're worded.
Hey, I appreciate it, Brother Mark. So,
The thing about this last one, though, to me, is so critical, is you don't have to go around and tell everybody that your husband is the greatest man alive, but what happens is just the opposite. You know, we want to act like we're good to our husband to his face, and then we'll go talk to our girl best friends, and all we'll do is talk bad about our husband. So not only are you dishonoring your husband, you're dishonoring God. And so that's about the worst thing that you can do, is to go talk to someone else, especially other women, and start talking bad about your husband. So, okay, you may not have to go tell everybody he's the greatest man alive, but you don't need to go around behind his back either and talk bad about him. All right, we got through with the women. So, already, yeah. Actually, we'll hit on it just a little bit with question number 5. So we'll pick up with question number 5 next week, and then I'll have another set of questions, and we'll be talking in our next lesson about why marriages fail. Thanks, everybody.